When only artillery attacks a hex and a fortress is in the target hex, the attacker can opt to just attack the fortress and any co-located artillery units. This would mean that the defender would have to take losses from any artillery present and then from his fortress. Infantry and other types of units in the hex would not be affected by this kind of attack. Only defending artillery would have the ability to counterattack. The fortress could not. As I mentioned early on, the way to deal with fortresses is with artillery, especially siege artillery. There are special rules that provide significant advantages to artillery attacking fortresses. Remember that a fortress counter really represents a complex of forts laid out in a ring. Here's a graphical representation of this. Here you see a ring of forts inside a hex. An artillery unit in an adjacent hex can fire only at a couple of these forts because the others will mostly be out of range. When only artillery units attack a fortress, the attacker gets a +1 die roll modifier for every hex side he has units attacking through. This benefit is due to the attacker being able to fire at more of the forts in the ring complex. So in this example, firing from 3 different hexes into the fortress hex, the attacker would get a +3 die roll modifier. Siege artillery units are the most effective against fortresses. These monster howitzers, like the Big Bertha you see here, could quickly obliterate the concrete fortresses built before the war. Yet these howitzers had relatively short ranges. Fortresses relied on infantry to keep these enemy guns as far away from them as possible. Yet without an adequate infantry screen, the howitzers could get close enough to make very short work of the forts. An adequate infantry screen for a fortress complex is 4 infantry strength points per hex side through which artillery units are attacking. Any less than this, and the howitzers can get close enough to fire line of sight, making their targeting easier and more accurate. If a fortress hex under artillery attack has less than 4 infantry strength points for every hex side the enemy artillery is attacking through, the strength of the attacking artillery is doubled. Let's take a look at an example of what you might see in a game. Here's the Belgian fortress complex at Liège, hex 2107 on the Western Front. The fortress has a strength of 36. Let's say there are 2 Belgian infantry units in the hex, a 6-4 division, and a 2-4 brigade. The German player has artillery units in 3 hexes, 2108, 2206, and 2207, and he will use all of them to attack the fortress. Note that while all of the German artillery units are across a river, the river terrain effect does not affect combat, as this is an artillery-only attack. The Belgian defenders have 8 strength points of infantry. This is enough to screen 2 hex sides of the fortress hex from artillery attack. But since the Germans are attacking from 3 hex sides, the Belgians don't have enough screening infantry, so the German artillery units have their strengths doubled. Also, because they are attacking through 3 hex sides into the Belgian fortress, the Germans will get a die roll modifier of +3. So while the Germans attack the Liège fortress with 8 + 8 + 4 + 3, or 23 artillery strength points, for which they would expend 12 supply points, they would attack the Belgian fortress using the 46 column of the CRT, because they're doubled, and then 3 would be added to their attacking die roll. The Belgians have no artillery units in the fortress hex, and therefore cannot counterattack against this artillery-based attack. The only real way to neutralize large fortresses is with artillery. If you attack with infantry as well, you'll have a bloodbath. Let's say that in the previous example, which I've expanded here, the German player was to use the infantry forces adjacent to the fort as well as the artillery. And let's say the Germans had 16 strength points of infantry in each of the 3 hexes he would be attacking from. First, I would point out that because this is not an artillery-only attack, the German will not get a +3 die roll modifier for the number of hexes he is attacking through. But the artillery strengths would still be doubled since the Belgians don't have an adequate infantry screen. So the German will still get credit for 46 strength points from artillery. And added to this will be another 48 infantry strength points, bringing the total German attack strength to 94. But since he is attacking solely across a river, and with infantry as well this time, he will have a -2 die roll modifier. The big problem for the German player is that since he is using infantry, the Belgians will get to counterattack. Since they are in a fortress hex, the Belgians won't have to retreat, no matter what the losses, so they will be tripled. The fortress strength is 36, plus 8 for the infantry is 44. So in the counterattack, this will be tripled to 132. In addition, they will get a +1 die roll modifier for defending solely across a river. All of this means that while the Germans may do somewhat more damage this way, they are going to take massive losses, something on the order of 25 infantry strength points due to the Belgian counterattack. By the way, I should point out that the Germans initially tried to take the Liège fortress with an infantry attack in the opening days of the war, and these units were massacred. Use your artillery to wear down fortresses before you ever involve your infantry.